Hi, everybody. This is Chuck from Midori Farm, Midori Farm Talk. We're going to talk beer today. And boy, does everybody love beer. I know I do. And I've got two great people with me today who know something about beer. We've got Vincent. He's going to talk to us about growing hops and everything that there is to know about that. And
Great,
then we're
thank you
going
for
to
having
talk
us.
to I love it, man. And Julien, we're going to talk to him. He's going to talk about brewing beer and how to make it and what goes into that. So we're going to get the farm side and the brewery side. And then I hope all of you can share your amazing comments with us and questions, and hopefully we'll get some answers for you, and maybe we'll ask you some questions too. And have your favorite beer on hand to drink, because it is a beer party. So here's to it. Kampai to everybody out there, and cheers. And
Cheers.
let's
All right,
begin.
let me go
Cheers.
get one.
Okay, you
Late
go
to
get
this
one.
party.
No worries, no worries. All right. All right. Well, I'm going to basically describe myself a little bit first. My name is Chuck Kayser. I'm from America, Chicago area. I've been in Japan over 20 years, and I'm an organic farmer. I've started Midori Farm a long time ago. And through Midori Farm, I've found it's a great avenue to meet people, to talk to people, and to connect people. And I like doing events in the mountains. I live in Kyoto City, so I like doing events there as well. But what I've found recently is everybody's on Zoom and everybody's online now. So let's get some talks going. And about a month and a half ago, my good friend Julien from Belgium, he asked me, Chuck, do you know anybody who grows hops? I'm thinking of starting a nano brewery and growing my own hops. And I said, I don't know how to do that. Ooh, nice looking beer, Hart. But I know a guy who does, and his name is Vince, and he's living here in Kyoto. So I put them together, and I want to hear how that went, by the way. I haven't heard about that yet. But and then I decided, geez, light bulb, I'm going to put them on a podcast, because that would be a great topic to hear about how hops are grown and how beer is made, and talk about that kind of stuff. So that's very exciting for me. And thanks again, Vincent and Julien, for joining us. And of course, Nobu, Julien's partner, is with us as well. Thank you for joining as well. So let's get started. Why don't we start with you, Vince? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in Japan, and things like that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. My name's Vince. Vincent, either way, it's fine. So I've been in Japan over 12 years now. I currently run a small company that does hospitality, so guest houses and hostels. Also, we have an organic farm up in Kyoto City, in Sakyoku of northern Kyoto. It's about 40 kilometers outside the city in the mountains. So if you go up Kurama Onsen, the same street all the way up, you'll reach Mosaic Farm. And at the farm, we are growing a lot of organic Kyoto vegetables. One of the main crops we're growing is hops. But in addition to hops, we're also growing watermelons, onions, variety of seasonal vegetables. Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, I don't think hops is a Kyoto vegetable, is it?
Yeah, it isn't. It isn't, definitely not.
maybe we should make it a Kyoto vegetable.
Yeah. Well, I'm waiting for some crazy Kenshisha at some Kyoto university to develop its own hop strain, so we can grow it here in Kyoto and brand it as a Kyoto product. But haven't seen that yet.
I think that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Now, you were kind of connected or associated with some brewery or something like that. Could you tell us?
Yeah. So how our organic farm works is that we work with all the local breweries. Well, not all of them, but some local breweries in Kyoto, but also Shiga Prefecture. For example, some of you might know Kyoto Brewing Company, Kyoto Beer Lab, and then Hino Brewing. So these companies, they supply their BSGs, which is brewery spent grains. And whenever they finish a batch of beer, they'll call us and we'll go pick it up and we'll bring it up to the farm and we use it at the farm. So there's different ways to use brewery spent grains. That's a whole different topic there. But we do composting of it. So we compost it, break it down, and then apply it to the field, or we direct sow. So we directly put the spent grains directly on the soil, and what happens is all the juices will seep into the soil, and then it'll dry up, and then the top husk layer will become a light mulch, so it will prevent further weeds from growing. And then also we put it in before the plow, so we mix it up with the tractor, and then it becomes organic matter within the soil itself. So generally those three methods. So that's how we work with local breweries.
That's awesome, man. That is so cool because
smells really bad though. So it sounds cool, but doesn't smell that good.
Well, come on, as farmers, we're used to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, what else are you going to put in your farm? Manure?
No,
I mean,
the
that
smell
doesn't
is
smell very
really, really strong. It's really
Yeah, because it is fermenting as well. So but you give it a week or so, and then you'll kind of lose the smell. But for the first week, you'll really get a pungent smell coming from your field.
Yeah. It really smells like old vinegar.
Yeah, old vinegar. Mm-hmm. Or, as Tom from Kyoto Beer Lab, he calls it death juice, which is
death juice.
Yeah.
Don't get it on your clothes, kind of.
Okay, well, I put it in my car, and then if there's a little hole in the bags, they put it in the garbage bags with 40-liter garbage bags. So sometimes just a little holes
just
there.
A little hole, yeah.
And just covers your entire car. So I've actually had to clean out my entire car and removed all the panels from the bottom, used a big hose and sprayed everything down, dried up everything.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Be very careful when transporting the BSGs.
Boy, I could tell some stories about.
I think Nils is trying to say something, but
Nils, are you trying to say something? You're muted. Probably.
I'm muted. You're right. I was saying so that bad smell happens even if it's not mixed in with the soil or anything. Just the brewery spent grains will, if you just leave them, they'll make that smell.
Actually, in the grain you have some lactobacillia, so it's a bacteria from lactose. Sure. And that's what can create the acidity in the beer. And so if you and since even if you do a good beer, you still have some sugar, so the bacteria feed with the sugar and create the smell super quickly. In about a few hours, you have the smell coming. So you can, if you let your grain in your bag under the sun for a day, the next day the zone is closed. You can evacuate. Really bad.
Actually, that brings a really important point is that breweries, and of course, Jewel will attest to it, but breweries, they actually have a big problem is that they have to get rid of their BSG as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So whenever you brew a batch, about 80 to 90% of the waste generated by a brewery is actually just the BSGs alone. Yeah. So that's a huge amount of the waste that they generate. They have to get rid of it somehow. And actually, most companies would pay garbage companies to pick that up and dispose of it. So actually, it's a cost for them to handle. But they work with us as it's a win-win relationship with local farmers. So we can use that, and then we take it off their hands. And actually, they just give us free beer in return for helping them with their situation.
It's a biggest win for you.
Yeah. So I'm drinking this unlabeled Kyoto Brewing Imperial Stouts that they just finished making. So they always give us a couple cases of stuff, just to remove the spent grains for them.
Wow, more incentive for me to make my way over there and get some BSG, man. That sounds like a good deal. Yeah. Get paid
I didn't know they were making an Imperial Stout.
Well, I guess maybe I shouldn't have said that, but we'll find out soon.
Oh, a new product.
It's like you need a knife and a fork to drink that stuff.
Yeah.
If it's well done.
It's like it is a pretty thick. It's like drinking a piece of it almost.
I think after this podcast, you're going to have random people showing up. Yeah, give me a truckload of brewery strength grains. I'm going to put it in my farm, and they don't have a farm. They're just dumping it just to get beer.
Hey, Vincent. I'm obviously working at a smaller scale, but I do get some beer spent grains left over from home brewing.
Yeah.
They are a nightmare to compost. I mean, I have a pretty big composter. We have a yard, but man, it just fires up the maggots, terrible.
Yeah, so because our farm is in the middle of the mountains and we're kilometers outside the city, so for us it's not an issue. So we just compost it, and we have a big gasoline tank, and we just pour it in, and we just forget about it for 1 or 2 months. And by that time, it'll turn black. And then, yes, there's a bunch of maggots that'll be eating at it. And then we just keep pouring more and more layers of BSGs on top. So it just condenses into the very bottom as it becomes soil at the bottom after 3 to 4 months.
So Vince, you reckon that the BSGs are the green element in compost?
I'm not sure the nitrogen content of it, but I would assume it is that type of same vegetation. It's definitely not the brown aspect, that's for sure.
Right.
To what extent is it?
It's
nitrogen?
both aspects actually. You have the carbon with the hull, because the beer you keep the hull of the grain of the
the husk of the grain.
And so you have carbon on that, and then you still have the green part of the grain. So it's a bit of both, but I think it's more carbonate since he was
okay.
It's boiled.
Not boiled, but before, when you do the malt, you heat your grain until you get the color you want. And so during that time, it's more carbonate at the end than nitrogen.
Okay. That's so cool. I mean, I know nothing about how beer is made. I'm really excited to hear more. So let's move along. Julien, why don't you talk about yourself a little bit, what you're doing here and how long you've been?
So my name is Julien. I'm from Belgium, and now it's been 3 years that I moved in Japan. So first my idea was just to move for 1 year and to study Japanese and go back to Belgium and do something with that. But now it's 3 years, so obviously it was a pretty good experience for me. And a year ago, we decided to move with Nobu, my wife, to a very little village in the middle of the mountain of Miyazu called Kamiseya. There is like 24 people living here in very old houses. And even if first we wanted to move here to open a guest house, after the coronavirus, we decided to follow another of our passion, who is beer, and one of my passion, who is brewing. So we decided to open a little brewery here up in the mountains. So we bought a house, an old house, and we tried to make a beer brewery there. A very small scale, so only 400 liters at once. So yeah.
Now, you say you turned a very old house into a brewery. I mean, that's a pretty big thing to do, I think. I mean, you need a lot of equipment and stuff like that, don't you?
Yeah, the house itself actually will be more for the living, and we want to open a little tap room where people can come and have a nice drink and maybe enjoying the local gibier, the rice, and why not pizza. And we have a little building attached to the house that's big enough to receive all the equipment. So of course it's a big investment in time, money, and effort, but we're still in the process, and we see next year, because in the plan we open next year around August for the first official release. But on the way, we brew last month our first beer in Tamba Sasayama, in Tambaji Brewery. So it's a friend who we brew together from one of my recipe. And so next month we should see this beer appear. Voila. That's
nice.
Well, it's inverted by the camera, but it's
it looks great.
A Belgian saison.
Saison in tango.
Called Saison in Tango.
Oh, fantastic.
Years ago, I had Tango beer. Is that the same brewery?
It's not the same brewery. Here, the Tango beer is actually a bigger brewery. They brew 1,000 liters, and it's Tango Koku. It's more, what can I say?
It's more kind of a commercial. It's a little bit more of a bigger.
Yeah, it's more like commercial brewery. Craft beer.
That's more towards like omiyage kind of.
Yeah, it didn't taste like anything special when I had it, to be honest.
I try not to say too bad things about their work, because they do good work and they're good. But
so this, you said Tamba, in Tamba Mountains, right? One that you're cooperating with?
Yeah, in Tamba Sasayama.
Tamba Sasayama.
About 1 hour from Kuchiyama on the south.
Yeah.
It's a tiny brewery too, but the guy is very, very great. Really in the craft idea of sharing, and you have no problem of sharing like his little secrets and stuff like that. It's
very helpful.
Yeah, very helpful.
I have a question for you, Julien. You termed yours a nano brewery. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's kind of
I've never heard that term. I've heard microbrewery, but I've never heard of nano
brewery. You have micro, you have nano.
Consider it a little bit
Pico.
smaller. Yeah.
I guess I'm Pico Brewery then. That must be Pico. 20, right. Just like 25, 22 liters. That's all I brew.
But it really depends of the country. In Belgium, for example, a microbrewery can brew like 15,000 liters. It's still a microbrewery. In Japan, a microbrewery is maybe 400 liters or 1,000 liters. It's still a microbrewery.
Okay.
The scale is really different. So here, in Belgium, I will be like a nano brewery, very tiny thing.
Well, that leads me to my next question. Now, Belgium, I mean, you guys have the best beer in the world, right? I mean, you guys brew the best stuff around.
It depends the taste. Look, you say that, but it's very hard to find a Belgian beer in Japan. You find some, like some classic that are not bad, but maybe not the best. But if it was really the best beer in the world, you would have like everywhere.
Oh, okay.
So I think it really depends the taste, because I really love Japan beer, like Kyoto Jozo beer. Come on, it's marvelous.
Why don't you talk more about what beers you like in Japan?
Japan, but I'm kind of classic. I really like Saison and IPA, but recently I really miss like a good Belgian brown beer. When the weather starts to be cold, you want something a little bit thicker. Like when you drink, it's like eating a pie or something like this. I kind of miss that.
Like the one Vince is drinking right now, right? That's more like a meal in a glass.
Kind of.
How about you, Vince? What kind of beers do you like?
Well, I think drinking beer, it connects with a lot of emotions too. So for me, I remember the first beer I ever drank, and it was actually a really good, I guess, considered a craft beer. This was when I was in my teenage years in Canada. So I think I was 14 years old or something, and my dad had Innocent Gun, which is a Scottish brand. And Innocent Gun, they're known for casking their beers in bourbon barrels. So it has a small little bourbon after flavor, woody, kind of a smoky aroma. So I had that as my first beer. So it has like a special place in my heart.
You're not pretty high on the
yeah.
That's
well,
right.
First beers, it's a pretty high level first beer. Usually everyone drinks like a Budweiser or something, but
that's right. You drove a Cadillac,
Blue Ribbon or something, yeah. But here in Japan, I mean, I'm from the West Coast, so I just love hazy IPA. So whenever I see one on any menu, I'll just get that.
All right, right on.
Good juicy beer.
Yeah.
All right. Now we talked a little bit about a nano brewery and a micro brewery, and you talked about how many liters you qualify for nano versus micro and stuff like that. And you said that in Japan there are even lower standards than there are in somewhere like Belgium or someplace like that.
It seems that Japan, but it's like kind of everything. Everything is a bit more little than in Europe, like the doors, for example. But for the brewery, for example, a very simple brewery in the middle of Brussels, it's already they can brew 3,000 liters at once. So, and for them, they are microbrewery and local brewery. So the scale is not the same, because I think the amount of beer and craft beer that people drink is very different. And something very different from Japan is that we don't have that many difference. We don't make difference between beer. We make difference between the style of beer. I'm gonna drink a blonde. I'm gonna drink a white, brown, stout. But for example, in Japan, you have happoushu. Then you have different kind of happoushu. You have beer. and everything is classified. And also, you're gonna drink Kirin, Sapporo, Asahi, and that kind of very standard beer that have all the markets. And then on the side, you have craft beer. But in Belgium, everything mostly is craft beer. And we have some commercial beer. It's more like this that we see it. So it's very different. That's why a brewery, even a microbrewery, is able to brew more and to sell more because everyone drinks craft beer.
What can you kind of define the difference between like a craft beer and a non-craft beer? I mean, what is the difference mainly?
We were talking about that recently with Nobu, and it's actually very hard to define. It depends on people. For me, a craft beer should be like a little scale of brewing. It should use as much as possible local ingredients and having very interesting, kind of explore what's a beer, going really in an unknown place of the beer. And but you could really have like always the same beer. Why not? Like Kyoto Jozo have some standards beer, but they still on the back they still explore and they still produce a very good quality beer with local ingredient as much as possible. But for example, in Belgium we have the Trappist beer, like brew into the Abbaye beer, exactly like a Chimay. But is it a craft or commercial? It's kind of in between because they have the Chimay is the same recipe for maybe 60, 80 years, 100 years. They brew the same beer all the time and they will never change a recipe, never. Never brew another beer than this one. Or they have 3 different kinds, but that's the 3 different kinds. That's it.
Yeah. I would say it's a high quality beer, but not really a craft beer because they're not trying to create anything.
Yeah,
they're just maximizing their ability to put out that one particular well-known beer that they have.
Yeah, but at the same time, it couldn't be very considered as a commercial beer like Budweiser or in Belgium we have Jupiler.
Yeah,
it's a super huge company. I think now it's owned by Brazil, and it's really really bad beer. It's really bad. So that's commercial. So you can't say that Chimay is a commercial beer. So it's really in between. So it's a very blur zone. We can't really say. I think it depends on people. It depends on the country. In Japan, it's very easy to define what a craft beer is. It's just not Asahi.
Well, like Asahi or like big companies like Sapporo, Asahi, the very top people, like the CEO of the company, they don't even know how to brew beer. Right. That's how I feel. Like they don't know the process of making beer, maybe the business part of it, but not really into the craft of the beer. So they can't really explain, how the beer is made, how the tanks are clean, all those little things that are very important in brewing beer, good beer. So, but then the craft for me, like just knowing the Japanese craft beer world, it seems like all the beer makers, they are the ones who are really like directly, like relating to all these businesses and also the brewing and all the craft beer making.
So for you, the craft label is more related to the company process, like really the business, more than the style of beer or the style of.
I think the style could be it's and then also there's like special editions and there's always like new, like the new craft beers coming every month, and so just the passion of making new beers is, I think it's very different. Yeah.
I remember in the 80s, early 80s, Vince, maybe you know about this, you're too young to have watched it on the theaters, but Strange Brew, have you ever watched that? That old movie? Oh, it's hilarious. So funny. You've really got to check it out. It's a Canadian movie. It's got Rick Moranis and I can't remember the other guy's name. And Max von Sydow plays the bad guy, and he's the brewmeister of the brewery because it takes place mostly around a brewery. Just really, really funny. So anyway, I don't know why, but I got the feeling like, okay, in a big beer company or corporation, they have brewmeisters. And those are the people who really know the process. And then you have the CEO who's actually just running the business and may not even like beer anymore. So it doesn't really matter because they're just
right.
running the money, right? So.
But even that, I could no problem imagine a craft brewery that the guy maybe brew like 3,000 liters, and the CEO, the guy, but he just think that it's a nice business, but he like beer, but he doesn't know about how to brew beer. But he have a good friend who's a brewmaster, and together they do good like combination. One is taking care of the business, and the other one of the beer.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a dream. You just focus on the beer and you just let the business for someone else. That's the best.
Is that what you would like to do with your brewery, or you wanna be involved with everything?
Since we are just two to deal with that, we involve with everything together more. Of course, Nobu is dealing more with all the Japanese documents, but in the same time, we both work on the order, what should we do, the plan, etc.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about, because getting a license to brew beer was literally impossible until not long ago, unless you made some fantastically huge amount of beer to protect the Japanese monopoly. I mean, everyone knows that, but I think it's got to be really tough to jump through all the hoops to get the license to brew and sell your own beer in Japan.
Yeah, it's pretty tough. But here, so we decide not to go on the beer license because, as you say, before it was even worse. Now it's 60,000 liter that you need to sell a year.
Right.
For us, it's still too much. It's brewing minimum 1,000 and selling minimum 1,000 liter a week. So it's a bit too much. So we're looking for the happoushu license. So that the happoushu allow you to brew 6,000 liter per year.
Oh, wow.
So you have to sell minimum 6,000 liter per year. So suddenly it's easier to get that. And the nice thing is that the happoushu, even if they changed the rule recently, it's still kind of easy to walk on the line between the happoushu and the beer. So happoushu is not just like sparkling, like drinks with a bit of alcohol. It could be a beer. It's just that in the recipe, I put some what we call like Irish moss. I'm sure you know. If you put Irish moss in the process, well, it's happoushu.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, it's very simple.
I do use Irish moss when I do my flocculation and clarification.
Yeah, everyone uses.
So I'm legal then already? I didn't know that. I don't have to hide anymore.
You have to fill a bunch of paper too.
Oh.
It takes a lot of rules, and it's a really lot of rules.
Yeah, difficult.
Yeah, but that's all Nobuko.
Okay.
Thank you, Nobuko.
If she's already done it, I can just pay her a little fee to have her do it instead of fighting with my wife.
But are you gonna brew 6,000 liters a year now?
No, maybe not. Maybe not. 6,000. Let me see. No, probably not.
22 liters. That's a lot of 22-liter batches.
Yeah. Okay, I've just lined them up in my kitchen.
Maybe you guys can tell me a little bit more about the difference between beer and happoushu.
That's the thing, is that in the rule, happoushu is before happoushu was everything that contained less than 64% of malt in the total amount of ingredients. So if you are 63% of malt, well, you happoushu. And then some ingredients, for example, if you put in your beer, if you do like a second fermentation with hops, it's a happoushu. And if you put some fruits or some syrup or some kind of very quick sugar during the process, the boiling process, well, it's a happoushu.
Really?
Like Midori.
So if I make beer and then just do a second fermentation with hops, with dry hopping.
Yeah, dry hopping, for example.
It becomes happoushu?
Yeah, it becomes happoushu.
Okay.
These rules, you don't really see it in any like license guidelines or anything. You don't see it online. You just have to kind of like go through different happoushu license, like the people who already brew beer already with happoushu license. And I don't know. I mean, people just kind of it like just kind of tells each other, like just educate each other. If you put mizame, I don't know how to say mizame in English.
Malt syrup.
Liquid sugar, yeah.
Liquid like syrup, malt. I use malt syrup sometimes.
Yeah. If you use that, but you don't see it in any guideline. So we just got this information from the brewery that we're getting an OEM beer.
And that's maybe the most important thing to say in that is that if you want to know more, actually you have to enter into this community. Into the craft community, into the brewer community, and to share that with people. But the nice thing is that in Japan, it's very easy, and this community is very, very like open. And I had a talk with Chris from Kyoto Jozo, and that he said that his idea is to really open this community of craft brewing, because together we're stronger. So to share this kind of little tricks and little tips, and it's better than just hiding and keeping for yourself. In Belgium, that will be almost impossible. It's too close, it's too old, and people are too like sitting on their the secret. It's like, no, I won't tell you my secret.
Yeah, that just like the Japanese sake brewing community. Very very close.
Okay, that's very interesting. I'd like to change gears a little bit and bring Vincent in, because I'm a farmer, I'm a grower. I like to learn how things grow and are produced, and I'm very interested to know more about how hops are produced. Vince, how long have you been growing hops now?
So I've been involved with growing hops for 2 years now. So still, I'm not an expert by all means, but I've gone through the cycles basically.
Yeah.
Quick question: Is anyone on here growing hops at this moment?
No, but I have a friend who's a farmer in South Kyoto, and he wants to grow hops.
Okay, yeah. So there's kind of a new push on hops recently. So seems like everyone's trying to jump on the bandwagon, from what I hear from my information too. But hops, hops are in general rare in Japan. Almost all the hops you see being grown are grown by big companies, specifically Kirin in Sapporo. They have their own hop field, but they only grow for their own company use, so they don't sell their hops to any other smaller brewers. So all the craft beer breweries, of course, they are trying to get access to fresh hops, but of course everyone uses pelleted dried hops and bought from overseas or imported from overseas. But there is a small movement for some craft brewers to start using fresh hop in their brew. And fresh hop is a very hard to obtain item in Japan, and it's also, some of you might already know this, but it's just once a year, once a season, and it stays fresh for a very short time. So to be able to access fresh hops for not just craft breweries, but also home brewers as well, it's like a luxury item, and it's something that people just want to try once in their life, because that's kind of the essence of brewing beer, is using fresh hops.
Now, can you back up a little bit and tell me, do you plant a seed to grow hops? Do you plant a cutting to grow hops? How does that work?
Hops are grown from rhizomes, not
rhizomes. Okay.
Yeah. So basically the root system will expand, and it'll shoot up little buds, and you want to snip off the new growth, and that new bud will lead up to a new rhizome, and that it grows. It's called a vine. So you might be familiar with the word vine. So like a ivy plant is a vine that wraps around something. Hop is a vine. So there's little tentacle things growing from the stem, and they latch onto anything, and it basically has to grow up. It only grows up. So you need to develop the support structure in order for the vine to wrap around, And that structure is actually the most difficult aspect about growing hops, is that it's not like any other regular crop. You just need a gigantic trellising system, and that costs money to do. And it takes some knowledge to know how to set it up, and takes a lot of time and effort to set up this type of structure.
How tall is the structure?
So there's no real limit in terms of how tall you can make your structures, but in general, like from what I see in Europe and so on, at least 5 meters is kind of the general.
Wow.
You want to go. We use 4 meters, which is slightly smaller, and yeah, if you go to Germany or something, or the Czech Republic or something, you'll see hops growing up to 6 or 7 meters high.
Wow.
They harvest them on gigantic trucks, and people stand on top of the trucks and everything like that. So the higher it is, the better, actually.
Oh, okay.
So actually, the hops they won't grow. You won't get the hop cones for the first 2.5 to 3 meters almost. So you only get them growing at the very beyond 2.5 to 3 meters.
Oh. Now I grow lots of things that are vining. I grow sugar snap peas, and I grow cucumbers and things like that. But I mean, we're at the maximum 2.5, 3 meters.
Yeah.
But so when my plants go beyond my trellis, they kind of start to hang over and stuff. Does that happen with the hops as well?
So yeah, hops we use the metal poles as the main structure. So the metal poles I obtained from a construction company, company that does scaffolding. You know those crazy Japanese scaffolding guys that the poles up.
That's right.
Yeah, I talked to one of those guys, and he set me up with a bunch of used poles for I got maybe 30 poles for like 5,000 or 6,000 yen. So for them, it's nothing for them. So you want that system, and then you're also going to run ropes on the top and on the bottom. So you'll need some type of clamp with that circular ring. Call them in hardware shops. So that's just so that the rope has something to tie onto.
Something to tie off to, yeah.
Yeah. So, and after that, it's just a matter of how well you tie the rope. There's kind of a specific way to tie it. So that's also the knowledge part about setting up the structure. But if you tie them in the correct way, they won't sag too much. But in general, you want, as the hops grow, they'll attach, all that weight is going to attach itself to the ropes, and it does sag. So when you set up structures, you want to invest proper money in setting up the structure. So we use a very heavy duty nylon rope, and there's some sagging, but not to any point that I'm worried about. Or if I had a bigger budget, I might have done metal wire. So depends, up to your budget. But basically, yeah, the weight, you need something to keep the weight and make sure it doesn't sag too much.
Right. So I mean, I'm picturing, so you've got all these poles, but you don't have like one pole per plant, right?
No. So what you have is,
and you've got rope.
I can show you briefly. I have a video queued up. I can show you really quickly if I can screen share. Is it okay if I screen share?
For it, yeah.
It's disabled. You have to put it in security to allow the.
Oh, okay. Let me do that.
When you look, just for people who maybe are not like used to hops, usually we harvest the flower of the hops, so we don't use the fruit actually, but the flower. That's the cone that will contain the lupulin. So it's a very little like yellow powder.
Yeah.
Like, it's very strong smell, and that's what we, as a brewer, we look for when you brew, is to get as much lupulin per hops you can get. And of course, higher the flower is, more sun you will get, and so bigger it could grow.
Yeah. Also, in general, hops as an investment or as a cash crop isn't really feasible in the fact that you won't get a full yields until the 3rd year. So you're pretty much you're not growing anything substantial for the first 2 years.
It sounds like asparagus.
It's kind of like asparagus. So in the first year, you're probably going to get a 20-30% yield of what you would have gotten in your 3rd year. Second year, you're probably looking at 60, 70%. And then on your third year, you'll hit that sweet spot. And then from there, it consistently grows, and it'll die off in the winter, but in spring, it'll pop up again. So it's a lot of work initially, but once you get past the third year mark, it just keeps popping up, and it'll come at full yields, and it'll produce the cones full of lupulin, which is what the brewers want.
It really sounds like a fruit tree. I mean, that's what fruit growers have to go through, is the first 5 or 10 years getting their trees and getting them set up, and then finally they'll produce for 50 years. I mean, how long could a hop plant live, do you know?
Generally, about 20 years is what most people say. It depends on the specific type of hop as well, and the conditions as well. But they will be consistently growing for a long time, definitely.
Now, Nils, I think you're waiting to screen share. I think I've enabled it for you.
Let me see. Yeah, I got to show you about 15 seconds of what the hop plants look like with the trellising system.
Nice, yeah.
Allow Zoom to share your screen. Wait. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay.
I have to let Zoom allow my screen. No, it's not going to let me do it. Forget it.
Okay. That's all right. If you can work on another few seconds, I've got a question for Julien. Joan Bailey, who's joining us, says, "Can you call your beer if you're a happoushu maker?"
Yeah, actually, for that, if you want to call your beer your happoushu beer, you can. Like in the label, you can say beer, white beer, or like saison beer. But in the little right on the side, you have to precise this is happoushu. So you really have to understand the idea of happoushu and beer. The difference in Japan is just a tax difference. So it's not really about the taste or about anything, just a money difference.
Wow.
One day they decide to make the difference because I'm sure to protect the bigger company. But then the bigger company, but I think at the beginning was for like the big company to be able to release a cheaper beer and paying lower tax.
That's interesting. Thanks.
So,
and I think
did it work?
Yeah, it's working.
Can you see hops?
We can.
Okay, I'll just give you 10 seconds of this.
Look at that. Oh my God, they're so put together.
The vine is cut and trucks with trailers come into the field to catch the hops as they're cut from the trellises. The top cutter pushes the trailer through the field until the bed is full.
So you can see at the top there, the wires are going across.
Since each variety becomes ripe at a different...
Yeah, this is
All right. Thanks, Nils. That's cool.
Here it's a very, very big farm.
That's a huge one.
Yeah. That's Oregon.
Vince,
So,
tell us, where do you put your truck?
We do everything by hand, actually. So literally climbing up a ladder and then using, I think in my picture on the fence, there's me using the scissors to snip off each line, because the hops are actually, they're tied to they're stuck on the line. So we just snip off the entire line. And we just pulled everything in. So we just snip the bottom, snip the top, and then the hops are all beautifully wrapped around this one string. We just bring that whole string into the processing area, and then we remove all the cones by hand.
You do like this.
In reality, of course, you want to use a machine that will separate, the vines and the hops, and even the string also becomes a waste matter. So we use twine, because we're going to end up burning it. But if you don't want to, you can use plastic string, but it should end up being garbage. That's also just trying to avoid using too much plastic. But actually, I did hear a good tip is that if you do use reusable string rope, like vinyl, what you can neat little trick is that you can actually pull the hops down lower to trick it into thinking that it's going to keep growing up. So you can maximize the cone growth area So when you see cones growing, you just pull them a bit down on the rope, and then it'll keep going up. So you're not that first 2-3 meters.
Isn't that interesting?
So next year I might try that. So I might use reusable rope and just keep that in place. Try that out. Might be everything's a trial and process, trial and error. So might not work. It might work.
Yeah, please try a lot. So when I'm gonna grow my own hops, I know what to do and what not to do.
Yeah. You'll learn from my mistakes.
That's right. Now, Joan Bailey has another question. She asks you, Vince, where did you get the rhizomes?
So I'm working with Hino Brewing as one of our partner companies. So we get our brewery spent grains from them. Also, I'm personally good friends with both. They're all of the 3 owners there. We also are in the Mikoshi together.
Oh yeah, for the shrines. Yeah.
So
I see those pictures.
Sean's he's also in the same Mikoshi group as me from Yasaka Shrine. So he ordered a huge batch from Oregon, and I jumped in on that order as well. So basically, I have the same hops that he has. So I'm growing Cascade, which is the one I recommend the most. It grows the most yield, and it grows the fastest from my observation in Japan, at least. And also we're growing Crystal. So if you're looking for lupulin or something with, bitter flavor, I think Cascade's a good choice. Crystal's a little bit more on the milder side. It's also a bit smaller, so it is a bit more floral as well. But if you want volume and you want that bitterness in volume, then you want to go for Cascade.
Wow! So you're using Cascade hops. Could you produce your own rhizomes from them?
Yeah. Once they're in the ground, you could produce the rhizomes. And what you have to do is in springtime, around early spring, late February, early March, you're going to have to remove the dirt and expose the root system, and then you'll find the new growth, and then you'll snip them off, and then you'll have one intact rhizome, and you'll see the little bud growing. So that's where the new hop will come out of. So you can put that into little planters, and then you can plant them again. So you can actually increase your hop field year by year, because each plant will produce more rhizome systems.
Or you could even produce those and sell them. I mean, if hops aren't available here so much, that could be a cash crop.
It is me and Sean from Hino Brewery, we were laughing about that. He's like, why are we even growing hops? We could just grow rhizomes instead and sell them to people as
exactly.
They cost. I saw online, and I think maybe some other people must have checked on as well. But some places are selling one rhizome for like 1,200 yen per rhizome.
Wow.
So
online,
as a farmer, as someone who's in agriculture, I would never purchase any seed for that much, right? I have to grow rice, you're buying one. Let's say something easy to understand. Okay, one. If you're buying in bulk, if you're buying one onion seedling, that's about 10 yen for one onion, right? So to imagine something 10 times that cost is rather expensive from an agricultural perspective, because you're doing it in bulk, right?
So that's a good point, Vince.
So I think if we were to sell them at something like 600 to 700 yen, that's still cheap for people locally, and that's go through all the effort and everything like that.
And I imagine the people who want to buy it don't just want one or two; they want like 6,000 or something like that.
Well, you'll have to have the structure to support 6,000. So the hops are expensive, but then you also need the structure, and you need the land to set it up. So it's quite complicated. Everyone says they want to grow hops, but when you actually get down to it, when you calculate all the expenses and land and time involved, it's actually very, very expensive to grow hops.
Now, how many hop plants do you have?
Our field is we have 80 there's more than one per kind of thing, but I guess 80 plots.
80 plots, okay.
So but I mean, there's multiple rhizomes in one section.
I see. So you have 200-300 hop plants, maybe.
Yeah, you can say something like that.
Okay. Okay.
Did you
so
make your own lines, or did you make your own structure for the?
Yeah, I made the entire structure. So if you go check out Hino Brewing, we set up the structures with them together. So we have the exact same structures and the same hops. So we share the exact same knowledge on the hops actually. And Sean from Hino Brewing, he's very helpful in that. So yeah, the system they have there, I also have in my farm too. And actually me and Sean, he's actually gonna come over one time and he's gonna do a home brew for us with our hops. So
wow, fabulous. Yeah. Now, where is their field located?
Their field's right next to their brewery, which is in Hino in the Blumen no Oka in Hino City in Shiga.
In Shiga, okay.
So that's a farm. So they own their own farm. I mean,
so I don't know if you know Hino very well, but they have a very unique brewery situation. So the city of Hino has this gigantic property, which is called Blumen no Oka. And it's kind of like a farm agricultural theme park. And within that theme park, and they built this a long time ago in the bubble area. So
in the bubble area, yeah.
They have a proper German brewery inside this agricultural theme park. And it has the best German, but it's really old school. It's the 1980 technology, but it's very good quality machinery. And they have this entire brewery there. But it was sitting idle for a long, long time. And Hino Brewing, they took over that brewery. And it's connected to this agricultural theme park. So there's countless agricultural land. It's like a petting zoo. You can go there and play with sheep, and there's the emus, and there's kangaroos and stuff like that. And they have flower fields. And then Hino said, yeah, we want to do hops. So the park offered a section next to the brewery for them to grow hops in.
Amazing. The reason I asked that question was, I'm growing way up in the mountains of Kutsuki, Shiga.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've got real winters there, and I've got monkeys, and I've got lots of different elements to my agriculture that people who grow closer to Kyoto just don't have. Mm-hmm. So I'm often asking people, well, how does this grow for you, and where are you? What kind of, we call them zones in North America, and I'm sure Europe uses zones as well to know, okay, well, you're in zone 6, so you have to plant it this time of year, and you can't grow this, but you can grow that, and stuff like that. And so I'm always curious about, different elements of agriculture, weather-wise and climate-wise. But it seems like that you and them, they are probably in about the same kind of a climate situation.
Well, I think in Japan in general is, I guess, ranging overall, but it's a set 6 to 7 for most of Japan.
Yeah, but I'm in a microclimate where I am, so it's hard to really scale mine. But the reason I'm asking is because you mentioned those two kinds of hops. Now, are there places where some hops just won't grow well? Like you can't grow these hops because you have a true winter, or you can't grow these hops because it gets too hot or something like that?
Hops in general are a cold light loving plants, and of course you can really find them in Europe, northern.
They do well in Belgium, and Belgium
Belgium is very cold.
Yeah, and of course, Oregon is like the hop capital of the world. So Yakima Valley has all the hops.
Also very cold.
And in Japan's also in that same climate zone. So actually, Japan is suitable in terms of weather-wise for growing hops. But however, there's other factors involved. It's not just the temperature, but also the soil. And hops generally they like kind of sandy, loamy type of soil, sandy loam soil. So it needs drainage. It cannot get saturated with water. So you have to have that right type of sandy soil, which Japan actually doesn't really have too much of. So that's kind of a challenge. Or you can artificially make sure the drainage is, there's no water that's kind of pooling
collecting.
Up. Yeah. Bedding them, like building them on beds. So then the water is kind of running off to the lower area. So actually, I built my hop field in a former rice field. So
that's what I was going to ask. Those are hell for drainage. How the heck did you do that? Did you bring in a digger and just take away all the clay, because they're engineered to hold water?
Exactly. So we just built beds, and then for the beds we made sure we used like better material for the beds.
Okay.
And
Did you
so
use
far,
perlite or something for
experimentation.
drainage or sand? What did you add to them?
We didn't. We added organic manure and fertilizer from a company in Kamioka, which is a soil specialist company. So they came in with a truck and they just poured the manure onto for us.
So do you use like oyster shells to make a little more like calcium?
For the calcium,
Yeah, I heard people saying that you're supposed to put that. We didn't put any of that, but we did continuously. We continuously put on the spent beer grains, like every month, another batch on top. So there's a lot of beer grains on the hop field, and I guess the beer grains they absorb some of the liquid or so on, so it helps somehow for some reason. And actually, Hino Brewing they also did the exact same thing. So whenever they finish brewing, they just bring their spent beer grains directly onto the hop field, and you just completely cover the hop field with the spent beer grains.
That's a really efficient way.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Now you're growing the hops organically, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We don't use any type of other type of fertilizer or pesticide. And I guess you mentioned pests earlier, like monkeys. Hops generally, in my experience, they don't really have any major pest issues.
Wow, I was going to ask you that.
Yeah.
You're lucky.
No.
I think I'm going to start growing hops because I got my fill of pests.
The only one I know is caterpillar.
Yeah.
Caterpillar on hops can make like a lot of damage, but all like shishi or like deer, monkey, the big one. If they come, they will try maybe eat one leaf and then say
bitter for them.
It's super bitter. Even the leaves itself, it's kind of bitter. So
I haven't seen much caterpillar damage. I mean, some of the hops they might have little holes in them, but it's not enough to worry about. The one thing the most common pest is actually the mildew. So the powdery mildew, the white kind of powder that covers the So you notice that. I mean, but that's generally due to bad ventilation. So if you're pruning, or if you're growing up against the wall, I think a lot of older places they grow up against the wall, so there's not much air movement in that. So mildew will produce in that type of setting. But if you're growing the vines individually, then generally there's enough airflow. Or you just prune them, just get rid of the bottom leaves. They won't do anything. They won't affect the growth of the plant. So you can just snip some of them off.
Yeah, Japan's got such a wet climate. Mildew is a huge problem. I get a lot of mildew on tomatoes and peas. So what I've learned is just to space them twice what they recommend, so you get the the ventilation and stuff like that, because that's the only thing that's going to prevent that powdery mildew from growing. I mean, the video that Nils shared, I mean, those hops were just stacked on each other. I can't imagine doing that in Japan. It would just be a mildew paradise for those.
If you go here in very close from where we live in so the next town of Miyazu is Yosano, and they have like kind of big hops farm.
Yosano has a huge hop farm.
And it's exactly that. It's like long line of hops, separate. Well, it's quite big, because here on the image you don't really see, but in between each line you have a bit more than 2 meters, so it's quite big.
Okay. Yeah, because they got to drive the truck through it, I suppose.
They're actually, it's all hand harvest. So on the plant. So when we went there to help for the harvesting for Kyoto Jozo, so it's not like Vince, what you're doing. So Vince, you go up, cut, bring all the vine under the shade. You got a nice beer and like sitting on the ground.
Remove and drink.
But here it's like you have like very funny like little like car. It's actually a platform that rise. So you start from the top, and by hand you pick up the hops that are ready. And so like this you can really choose the one you want and come back later to harvest the rest of it. So it's more work, but
and you have to do it during the daytime. You can't really, there's a time limit.
Yeah, there is a time
finish harvesting
to start and to finish, and and you finish with your hand like super sticky and oily, and the smell.
Harvesting hops it's very intense, because they'll go bad very quickly. So when you have to keep looking at them and then when now's the time when it's decided that now's the harvest, then everyone just pours in and works, and then you have to get everything in. We harvest under the shade. We don't because the hop cones, the flowery part, they're very weak and they'll dry up easily. So you want to harvest them as soon as possible. And what we do is we bag them and we remove the air so it doesn't oxidize, and then we freeze them immediately. And then once they're frozen, then you can use them for at least another half a year to 1 year, depending on the condition. So in that sense, you can still have fresh hops available for the rest of the year. But if you don't, if you don't do that, then they're going to turn brown in a matter of 1 or 2 days.
And the problem is that you have a high risk that your beer we have like a kind of garlicky.
Yeah, it'll taste bad.
And it's really easy to have a beer to understand the taste. When you have a beer that has kind of slight garlic, you can say, okay, the hops wasn't fresh anymore. So that's why I saw everyone using pellets more than fresh hops, because the pellet, it's easy to store. It's easy to, you can keep it for a very long time on your fridge, and yeah, it's easier to use.
Now I know some of the people here, Nils and I think Hart, you were talking about you do a little bit of home brewing. You guys use pelletized hops?
Yeah, for sure. I use pelletized hops because, I don't have any source even for fresh hops as far as I know.
There is no way to get even like leaves, because when you brew, you have the pellets, you have the leaves, or you have the fresh. Leaves is just hops that they
right.
So they have a dryer that's keep all the good thing, the good lupulus into the leaf without giving this brown taste of garlic. But that in Japan, it's mostly impossible to find. So it's when you homebrew, it's just pellet. Yeah.
You talked about the hops growing up near Maizuru. What variety of hops do they grow mostly in Japan?
Over there, mostly they have Chinook and Cascade, because it's really easy kind of hops to grow.
It's a strain to grow.
Yeah.
The Japanese main lager beers, their ordinary supermarket beers, what kind of hops do they usually use?
I can't tell, or I go to jail. Actually, if you look on the can like of Sapporo, they put in their ingredient, they use rice. So that's one thing. They use rice, sugar a lot in the beer. And they use hops, that's Japanese hops, that was created in the 60s or 70s.
Okay.
It's a big complicated story. It's from a very old Japanese hops that was brought to America, and then it was kind of lost, and then a Japanese scientist just find it back, bring it back to Japan, and make it suitable for Japan beer. And from then, Sapporo is using mostly these hops. It was really made for Japan.
Oh, okay.
But right now, the only way to get it is to go to the US and to a farm that grow these hops, rhizome, like on the black market, because it's a very protected kind of hops.
Because I think of Hallertau as basically the lager hops.
Yeah, but
basically.
A lot of hops actually come from Saz or Hallertau. It's hops. It's always the same plants. There's no different plant of hops. It's always the same, but they have different variety of the same plants, and so and even like the new American style, they mostly come all from Belgium or like Czech or German hops. It's just that they cross.
Right. Okay.
They get a new one. So that's why when
I'm waiting for someone in Japan to develop an original strain from Kyoto, and then we just grow that instead.
Great idea. I second that. Here's to the Kyoto hop. Let's put that out there. The Miyako hop.
That would be really great. Just ask a good lab. But,
yeah. Well, I have another question from Joan. She's asking about hops. Do they have a disease issue? Because she read in the Hop Growers Handbook. Now, a woman who has read the Hop Grower's Handbook, that's a woman after my own heart. And she said that Japan used to have a hop culture, but it was lost due to disease. Do you know anything about that, Vince or Julian?
I don't know the exact history of hops in Japan. I know Japan, actually, there is a naturally occurring hop variety. And hops, it is it's part of the hemp family, which, yes,
okay.
Much of the food's going to say, it's part of the marijuana, the marijuana family.
Interesting, because hemp is not a vining plant.
It's a naturally occurring
kind of plant.
But the one in Japan that is naturally occurring, from my information, from what I've read, is that it's not usable for food production. So it's basically a natural weed.
Okay.
So the hops we are growing right now are all from probably originally from Europe at some point. But now, of course, in northwest USA, they have a very strong hop growing culture there, and our hops that we use are from this USA.
Right. Well, I mean, the long story short about hemp in this country is very tragic, because it's such a great crop to grow for so many reasons. It's like 1,001 uses for hemp, and it was just it was made illegal due to the Cannabis Act, and everyone's like, it's not cannabis, it's a totally different thing, but it just got lumped into the same thing and just out the window. And that destroyed a lot of small societies and cultures in Japan. It was really
maybe that's what Joan's referring to, in that maybe because of that, it's no longer the hemp culture or the natural hop culture. But then
I wouldn't be surprised.
Beer use specifically, Japanese hops are not generally used for beer production.
Oh, and then because they were never used for that, because now the Belgian or the European one, it's been hundreds of years cross, and it selects for particular type. So you can't say it's a natural one anymore. It's
the Japanese hops, I don't think they even produce lupulin, so there's nothing usable.
No, very, very low amount. So
it's not usable.
Wow. Oh, okay. Well, thank you. That was an interesting question, Joan. Thanks for the question. Okay. Well, Vince, I had another question for you. Are hops used for anything except making beer?
So, one of the reasons why I'm growing hops is that although the main demand for hops is in brewing, and especially home brewers want to also get access to fresh hops. So I want to be able to provide one day private home brewers with fresh hops, so they can have fun with that and growing that in their own homes and try that out.
Hart and Nils are giving you a firm thumbs up there. Yeah.
Another reason is actually I'm interested in hop production for food, actually. So using it in food production. So we are actually in kind of an experimental stage at this moment with Shizuya, which is a Kyoto bakery chain.
Oh yeah.
They're one of the guys from their kind of business development section is using our hops and producing bread out of it. So we've been getting samples from them with nice, really big loaves of bread that they said they put our hops in. So far, they haven't really come out with a good enough usable recipe that's sellable, but at least they're trying. So that's one thing that's going on. Another thing is I make sausages using game meat. So that's like my own.
Inoshishi, right?
Yeah. So for me, it's all about the sustainability issue. So there is an overabundance of, I guess you can call them pests, but inoshishi, especially for farmers, that they're the farmer's bane, which is there's a lot of them, and there's not enough hunters, and even when the hunters kind of find them or kill them, a lot of times they're just kind of left there. They're not usually used, so it's kind of a waste. So we want to use that meat and produce something, but also make it something special. So that's why adding hops into the meat sausages will make it into something brand new. It's a new type of flavor that Japanese palates haven't tasted yet. So it's kind of it's got that gamey smell and flavor, but there's a hint of that bitterness at the end. So it's it's very, very unique in that sense. So I've been working on that on my own as well. Also, we're working with some other restaurants that want to use hops, for example, in tempura or so on.
Ooh.
Vincent, doesn't a lot of this depend at some point on whether or not we can get home brewing more legalized?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's one of the, one of the problems. I mean, I would talk more about it with my friends and colleagues if it wasn't in the gray zone.
Yeah.
Of course, that also makes it more difficult to have a thriving community and a thriving market for these things.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, I guess, the alcohol laws. So, I mean, I personally don't know too much about that, or I'm not a brewer myself. I'm more on the agricultural and kind of food aspect of it. But I do believe that hops is kind of a good medium to work with, and that might connect into the home brewing aspect of it, and it might bring the issue out into the light. In terms of how the laws will change, that might be a question for Jewel to kind of poke at. I don't know how about you feel about that?
Well, for home brewing, just to be sure, home brewing is not forbidden in Japan. It's totally legal to home brew. What it's illegal is to produce a drink that contains more than 1% of alcohol. So good luck.
So
I think it's possible to do that, but who wants that?
Well, all of my beer kits come with Japanese instructions, and they say the last step says, now add water until it's less than 1%. So everybody just skips that last step.
I forgot to do
where you can get all the ingredients, you always say the rules, like know that it's forbidden to produce more than 1% alcohol. So it's kind of ridiculous. Yeah, it's a bit stupid rules, but it's just to protect the market and to avoid people having homebrew everywhere and avoid accidents, I suppose. But yeah, it's a very difficult question. But just to know the rules not gonna change because, well, they don't care. Like you say, the community of homebrewer in Japan is a very little community, so there's no any power on it. But right now, Yosano, so where they grow hops, the mayor of Yosano, who's a very nice young guy, he really wants a city to be kind of the homebrew city, the Japan beer city. So he tried to make new rules just for this town to be able to make homebrew legal there.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be a start, like you said, just to put that under the light, just for people to say, hey, that exists. And it's not, because when you say, oh, I'm doing beer, brew at home, people are like, what? Wow, how is that possible?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you think about brewing in Japan, you think about maybe Nihonshu. And of course, it's huge, it's a big thing, it's a whole tradition, it's a big material. But when you start to explain actually what making beer is, people say, oh, so that's not that hard, actually. No, it's not. It's mostly making tea with grains and mostly washing. But so I think slowly by putting that under the lights, maybe there will be some change, but I really don't think there will be any change on that. Actually, the only change that will happen is maybe the opposite. That would be even harder to get a license, harder to get ingredients, and that it's going more in that direction.
This is an interesting point because it's illegal to grow tobacco. Why I'm not saying it should be, but why isn't it illegal to grow hops? I mean, clearly there's mainly one use for hops.
Hops is not illegal.
It's not legal.
But
hops. No, it's not. It's legal to grow.
It's legal. That's what I'm saying. So why isn't growing tobacco legal? This just follows point. I mean, why criminalize the beer brewing instead of the hop production? I mean, in the States, it's legal to brew beer, but it's illegal to grow tobacco. So that makes sense. But here, it's like, well, just criminalize growing hops. I'm sorry, Vince, I don't want to step on your toes. I'm not saying you should do that. But it's just an honest question. It's like, why don't you just nip it in the bud, so to speak, pun intended. Just eliminate the whole thing and said, yeah, grow all the hops you want. You just can't make beer from it. You know, that's all. It's like teasing us, you know? So, I mean, it's an interesting thing when you're in agriculture and you start thinking of the laws of society and you think like, these don't make sense, you know, like criminalizing hemp. It's like, why did they do that? Because it makes us better individual societies. I mean, I don't get it. So some of these laws always vex me when I'm farming. I feel like these are just set out for protecting the corporations.
If you think from the government side, everything makes sense. Actually, everything is studied to make sense, and the rules are not here by mistake. They know what they're doing, and just for us, because it go against what we want to do, it doesn't make sense. But yeah, for example, not being able to produce more than 1% alcohol when you brew, it's just to avoid everyone brewing their own beer or own alcohol and not buying any more alcohol. Just that, just always money.
It's always money, isn't it? Yeah.
It's taxes. So
taxes. See, I mean, I think if they just made home brewing legal, you just have to get a home brewing license that pays for the taxes. I mean,
I might rather have it illegal then, to be honest.
Yeah, my wife will step in and stop me then.
That's right. That's right.
Rule for the home brew than to open a brewery.
Yeah.
No, like, okay, you need 2 sinks, 3 sinks. One you can open with the elbow, and then you need a toilet attached to the brewery and a window here and that. Just because you want to brew your 5 liters kits. That would be funny.
Yeah.
So a question for the home brewer: Where are you going? Where are you getting all your ingredients usually?
There is a company. What is it? An Aichi? I think it's an Aichi. Their website is right in my hot links, so I can tell you the name of it is sakeland.net. Sakeland.net.
Japanese company?
Yeah, it's a Japanese company, and they have all of the kits, and you can do directly from the we call it a liquid malt kit, or the grains, or a partial mash, which means where you're using a kind of a malt syrup and grains together. So they kind of, they're flexible in the way you can do it, and you can get all kinds of hops there and stuff. So I've got Amarillo hops now for the first time.
They have a wide variety of hops and grain there. It's pretty nice. Only thing is that their kits, like they sell like buckets and stuff like this, it's not that great. But for the rest, it's pretty wide variety. You have another site, I don't know if you know, it's called the Malt Shop.
That guy in Yokohama, right?
I don't know about it. Can you give me the link?
Yeah, actually, it's not far from Hino Brewery.
In Yokohama.
Oh, it's in Shiga then.
In Shiga, the Malt Shop.
Oh.
It's you have so it's really like complementary to Sakeland. So you can get different malt, different hops. You have a more like rare variety of hops. They sell like kettle, buckets, and all the stuff. Then you just have to make yourself a calcul to see which one is cheaper, but it's in Shiga, so very nice.
Yeah. So you could do a stop at Hino Brewing along the way too.
Yeah.
Cool little trip.
Nice.
Okay, it's right out there. That Hino place is right out in the middle between Biwako and whatever.
It's slightly on. It's a separate line on the train, but it's a bit to the east of the lake.
Oh, it's possible to get there by train?
Yeah, there's a station. By car, if you take the Kosoku from Kyoto City, it's like just over an hour, hour and a half or something.
Okay, I'll take a look at it.
Actually.
Yeah, I basically buy most of my stuff from the malt shop, but now that you're saying, it's a bit confusing because sometimes I get shipment from Yokohama from him, Fred, and sometimes I get from somewhere in Kansai area, Shiga, I don't know.
Okay.
I think it works with another company in Yokohama that there is like a homebrew shop in Tokyo area.
Because because I do all grain stuff, and a lot of the other websites are not quite as suitable for that. And I've been home brewing, I don't know, for 15 years or so. Wow. In all kind of different countries. Mostly just a good hobby to have around, to keep their fridge stocked.
Yeah, man.
Make some friends.
Right.
But I never expanded beyond. I had one time a 40-liter system going when I was living in the UK, but that was the largest I ever wanted to become. But yeah, I mean, I always had some dreams about it. But I always lived in places where it wasn't easy, and even here, it's not easy. In the summertime, it's just miserable to brew beer. Temperature control.
Temperature control, the humidity control in Japan.
Yeah, the amount, dealing with the mold and the mildew, and it's just, you have to be so on it, and it takes a lot more effort. Like I brewed in Germany when I was living there, and it was just a pleasure. Everything was easy to get, the environment was right, the temperature was right most of the year.
Belgium too. It's so easy, Belgium. I just take the car and I drive for 10 minutes and I have like a big homebrew shop where you can get everything. It's like the Alibaba cave. So
yeah,
it's on for like price that's so
but
cheap.
Maybe that's what makes it a little bit more special to do it here. Everyone feels a little bit more pioneering.
Definitely.
What do you guys think it costs for a good bottle of beer for homebrew? What do you guys think per bottle, Nils and Hart?
Yeah, it costs about, for a good bottle of beer, you can get it for like 80 cents a bottle, or 80 yen a bottle or so.
You want me to include like electricity, water in that?
No, nothing like that. Just basically ingredients.
Just the ingredient. Just the ingredients.
A percentage of your
60 to 80 yen a bottle.
I'm sure there's a lot of upfront investment for all your materials, your buckets.
Yeah, but you can start out small. I've only been doing it for 2 years, and so I still just have a small kit, and I cook stuff on a big ass soup pot in my on my stove, so it doesn't cost that much. I can show you everything.
Yeah.
No, but
That's cool.
if you're a little bit like handy and DIY, you can do pretty good stuff by yourself. It could be hard to find a good equipment in Japan, but if you dig a little bit, you can find it like on Monotaro. You can find
Yeah, that's right. That's cool. And I think doing it like that is quite enjoyable. I mean, it's so much more fun when you do it yourself,
Yeah, and the pleasure when you get your beer and it's good, when it's ready and it's good, and you can drink it. You can tell that your 20 liters is gone in a few weeks. Because you give to people. It's super nice here. But we live in this little village. We have often people coming at home, the neighbors. So I provide the beer all the time, and it's super nice. The feeling of being able to share that with your friends, it's very something special.
Yeah, Julien, your beer is so good too. It's so amazing.
The challenge though is providing it to people who have either drank, macro beers their whole life, or have only started into craft beer and they're very only familiar with a few other varieties. Because what you get from home brewing, you're rarely going to have the conditions that you want to do a lager, in the way that they're familiar with. Right. The temperature control itself already eliminates that for most of the year. And so you're mostly brewing ales and mostly, varieties that you want to have a little bit more flavor and texture to cover up any errors that you're inevitably going to make. You can't brew like a perfectly crisp pilsner and not have any diacetyl or something as a home brewer. It's just like very difficult to pull it off. So you have to approach it a little bit differently.
It's very different between like brewing in a brewery scales. It's really different, two different job, I want to say. Like you say, you try to cover your mistake by putting maybe more hops or using another yeast that bring more tastes and stuff like that. And for sure is different from brewing.
You know, some people will say mistakes. I would say mistakes. I've been doing it a long time. Other people will still call that, you know, art. Like,
art.
It's the craft of
No,
beer.
it's a craft brew. You've got to like it. Yeah.
No, but the irony is, earlier you guys were talking about, and Julien said that craft beer or microbrewing is about innovation. So once you're at the level where you're making a consistent manufactured product, then you're no longer really innovating. You're going to just start repeating that, you know, whatever model you have that will make money. But if you're forced to innovate because you're rarely able to recreate exactly the same thing up into a certain scale, by definition, you're innovating every time to a certain extent, you know, like it's not to say that it's like wine where there's a vintage, it's totally different, but you, unlike, you know, maybe at Julien's scale, he can start to repeat to a certain extent a variety, but I can imagine at 400 liters, still it's hard to get a consistently manufactured product. Like, and why would you want to?
I mean, even if you can like kind of minimize the variables and try to make things pretty consistent. I mean, hops have to be different from year to year. I know my vegetables that I grow are different in quality from year to year, so there's going to be some slight differences. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, totally. Like, for example, the bitterness of the hops can change year to year. So you can have like you cascade with a certain amount of bitterness, and so you're used to that, and then suddenly you get another bitterness, and when you taste your beer, like, wow, it's not the one I brew usually. Sometimes it's good news, sometimes, but sometimes you have to rebrew.
Yeah, and this is something that's like a common, you know, this is acceptable in wines, for example. Oh, the 2008 is a good year, but the 2009, you know, but whereas beers, they want to keep that consistency. How is that done? I mean, how can they do that?
I think for that, it's just a matter of history. The wine, I just have an history that, it's such a quality product and such luxury product that you have this whole world all around that you can say, yeah, this wine, it's 2019, I can feel like different from 18. But why not for beer? It's just because commonly beer is drinking by the workers, by the farmers. That was from the beginning. Beer, it's a very cheap product, and cheap alcohol that actually first replace a meal. So in Belgium, for example, we were talking about the saison that we brew in, we say the Belgian saison. This beer was made to feed the workers when they come to harvest the wheat. So the guys would just come harvesting the wheat, and the wheat from last year was used to brew this beer saison of the wheat harvesting to feed the guy. So that was the main thing of the beer.
I think a lot of workers were showing up for that lunch. It's like,
But even like when you talk about like stout or like a porter beer, it was a beer made for the guy who was like discharged trucks or boats and stuff like this. They get like 2 quarters for their lunch break.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting.
You get up at 5, then your lunch is 2 beer, and then you go back to work.
The beer I made last winter is called Miner's Stout from New Zealand. It was for miners. It was a coal miner's lunch, basically. I don't know why they would drink alcohol at work, but
so, I do.
Work.
So last year that was my fanciest brew. I made this stout beer with coffee that I steeped in bourbon, and put just a little bit of coffee flavor into it, about 400 milliliters of coffee, and then a bunch of coffee beans steeped in bourbon, and it added just a little coffee touch to this, and that was pretty exciting for me.
Sounds exciting.
I did that.
Another thing about like when you say why wine, it's more fancy than beer. It's also wine takes more time. Wine, you do it once a year, and then you can drink it the next year. Beer, in a brewery that have the system for, it takes 2 weeks to brew.
Wow.
So even
but I mean, wine lasts forever. I mean, if it's stored correctly, you could have a 100-year-old bottle.
no,
beer though eventually.
The guy who have like 100 years bottle, usually that you never drink it, you just sell it. It's
you
like
just sell it.
Investment.
It's a.
But I mean, you can't have like a 5-year-old bottle of beer that's an expired. It's like, no.
Yeah, 5 years is okay. 5 years is okay. No problem.
You have beer that can age actually. Like a lot of Belgian style beer can age. So a lot of people have this in the cave for like 5 years, and then they just pop one for you. It's a very special moment because they keep this, and you're like, why didn't you drink it? But we can have this. Not all be like an IPA. Don't keep it for 5 years. After even 1 year, it's not like the flavor just gone.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of IPAs and hops and like freshness, like Vincent, when you harvest, do you like test the hops to see what the alpha level is, like the bitterness level is, or
so
that's one way to achieve consistency as well, is to kind of know what the bitterness is when it's packaged, of course.
How they measure the bitterness of hops is actually quite visual. So a lot of it is just literally just opening up the leaves and looking at the content of the cones, and every cone will be different too. So even in one plant, you won't have consistent amount of lupulin in each plant, and each cone will be different size too, because the hops at the top, they'll be bigger at the top than at the bottom. So it is kind of hard to judge on an individual scale. But what they do, at least from, I don't know about Europe, but in the States, is that they'll kind of take an average from the entire crop, and then they'll have a specialist will actually give it a classification of how much the yield is in terms of the lupulin content and so on. So in that sense, that's how they generally range it. But for my scale, for like such a small scale, there's no way to actually really know. And I'm not on that level of being able to kind of guess exactly how much I'm producing in terms of level of lupulin. So yeah, I don't know. How about Julie? You want to add on anything to that in terms of how they classify hop lupulin contents in hop production? Because you were at Yosano recently, right?
Yeah, I really harvest at Yosano, and I know that there they do, like you say, an average. They get a lot, and then they have a lab doing the average of alpha acid and beta acid and that kind of stuff. But that's all I know. I'm really not professional in hops.
And I mean, as home brewers, I mean, I'm just curious, how interested are you guys in? Have you ever used fresh hops? First of all,
no.
And
when I was brewing in Europe and in the US, I used fresh hops quite often.
Yeah.
But part of the problem was basically you had to you knew with fresh hops that you weren't going to have the consistency of pellets, like
too many
exact level of bitterness. So if you were going to brew something with fresh hops, you needed to know roughly how bitter it would be so that you could match the style with it. But beyond that, you just had to accept the vintage, what was going to come out. And now, of course, I've heard that they've got all sorts of weird methods to really ensure that the level of bitterness is consistent, like freeze drying and.
Well, now they have lupulin powder, direct, just pure. It's like crack cocaine for home brewers. So you can buy just the lupulin powder itself.
But we need the aroma too.
Yeah. Well, some people, I mean, you can supplement that with something else, right? You don't need the hop flower, the hop cone itself might not always provide the exact type of aroma that people are looking for. So yeah, I mean, using fresh hops is always risky because there's so much liquid content in the actual vegetation, and you want the lupulin, but you're also getting all this, vegetation in the whole process. So actually when you brew a fresh hop beer, it tends to be a little bit more watery than most people expect it to be. But as you said, there is a small hint of floral essence to it, but you could somehow supplement that somehow. But I think using fresh hop beer, it is kind of a novelty for a lot of brewers, though. It's like just to say that I did it once in my life, and a lot of the actual brewing companies, they'll just do one batch the whole year. They won't do more than one.
Anyway, especially in Japan, you cannot do more than really one or two because just for the price, it's just impossible.
It's too expensive.
Because it's 5 times the price of pellet hops. So.
And then there's no supply as well. So even if you wanted to, you just don't know where to get it from.
And here in Yosano, if you want to do that, you have to harvest by yourself. So you really need to be motivated to do that.
Yeah. So it's a weird crop. It's better used if it's dried and already processed into pellet form, because then you know exactly what you're going to get in terms of that. So for brewers, that's easier to gauge. But from my perspective is that I want to start introducing hops into the food scene. So that changes things a lot. So then you want to use it as fresh as possible. So if you put it in bread, if you put it in meat, if you put it in tempura, or even if you use it for non-food products like incense sticks or something. So there's other ways to use it. So in that sense, my aim is to actually expand the use of hops, not just in brewing. Of course, we want to make it available for home brewers too, but we also want to expand it and use it into different types of things. So for me, I'm more curious on that aspect.
I came to brewing from sourdough bread making, so that's what you're describing is very interesting to me, and I never heard of it before, using hops in bread. So now I've got hops and I've got my stuff, so I'm thinking of saying, what can I do here?
My experience, it's really hard to have bread with hops.
Make some Amarillo bread. I don't know.
It's hard because the leafy content itself, it doesn't taste that.
Actually, it's really bad.
Yeah.
What I did was pretty bad, and when you bite, it was like nothing or super bitter.
Yeah.
It was.
You need a good balance, or some people like cover it with they put cheese in the bread just to like kind of even it out a bit. So bread is still like Shizuya. They gave me like 4 or 5 samples, and so far all 4 or 5 haven't really turned out. They have the hop was barely there. Like you could taste, okay, there's something a little bit different than a typical Japanese white bread.
What do they just use do they make a hop tea and use that water to make the bread, or are they putting the hops into the bread?
I don't know the exact process, but I think they ground it and they mixed it into the dough and then they baked it.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's actually another interesting point is that when I make the sausages, I use alkaline water and I boil the hops in it, so it preserves the green coloring. If you boil it, it'll turn brown and it'll look bad. So if you use alkaline water and you boil it, it'll maintain that fresh greenness, and then you dry it with a paper towel, and then you grind it with a little coffee grinder, and then it'll become this kind of powdery material, and then you can use that into the meat, mix it into
the meat. That's cool.
Yeah, so you can see the green aspect of it.
Does it also work like a preservative in the sausages?
I'm not sure the science behind it, but I like the flavor of it. So, what are the preservative properties? But you're adding salt anyways into the sausages, so there will be the preservative.
And then smoking, of course.
And you can smoke it as well, yeah. So there's different ways to preserve the meat. So I don't know if just hops did anything, but of course, if you add the salt and you add the smoking method to it, then yes, it'll be preserved through that.
Oh, it's a good question because first hops on the beer were just used for that, to preserve the beer.
Well, I thought the whole IPA history is that it was preservative method. I don't know. You mentioned that IPA doesn't last that long, but I think the reason why they
the taste of the IPA.
Yeah.
That's long.
Preserve the flavoring. Yeah.
In the legend, because we don't know if it's true or not, but the legend is that IPA was created to send a beer to the Indian colony.
Right.
So they just put a lot of hops to be sure that during all the boats to India, the beer that arrived to there is still good to drink.
Yeah.
But we don't know if it's true, but the story is kind of...
That's what I heard too, so.
I always imagine this like red English guy waiting for their beer coming. Just the image is kind of cute. Like with spirit in India to have a fresh drink. And
Wow.
Think about myself when I arrived in Japan, and I was like desperate looking for Belgian beer because I didn't know about Japanese craft beer world, and I kind of discovered it very late and kind of regret that. But I was just like raving for Belgian beer, and any like supermarket that was selling Belgian beer, I was just taking my bicycle riding for 2 hours just to get a chimay.
Wow.
Something I would never do in Belgium.
That's great. Well, we have gone a bit over time. I'm okay with that, and I'm really loving the way this is going. But we should wrap up soon. I'm done with my list of stuff to talk about, though. So if anybody else has questions or things to talk about, I'm open to it.
I had one question for the people who brew more than me. I wanted to know do they ever use a kind of a hop tea to flavor their beer instead of boiling the hops into the beer, into the wort, I should say, boiling it into the wort. Instead of boiling into the wort, do you ever add hop tea later in the process?
Usually hops, so what we just say, hops is really used to preserve the beer. So in boiling it's an important part of it, of that preservation process, more than actually the dry hopping. So because if you don't boil, you're not gonna release all the alpha acid and other acid that are gonna help to preserve the beer. So just making a hop tea won't be enough. For hops, so we talk about the pellets, there's a leaf that you put in the boil, there is the fresh hops that you can put, there is also just the lupulin, so just this powder that you throw into your boil. And there is what they do is the hops oil, so essential oil of hops.
Right.
Press to get the oil. But that also is added into the boil time. We release all the acid of the hops.
Thank you.
What I know is that no, there is no like hop tea that you add, but try.
Yeah, let us know how it goes.
You have the opportunity to compare to someone who brew like 10,000 liters. You have the opportunity to fail. So
right. I did fail my last one during the coronavirus. I was here in this studio, not at my house, and I missed the opportune time to bottle. And for the first time ever, oxygen, it got oxidized and was ruined. So it was my first time to actually fail in a brew.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. That must be awful. Oh.
It was painful.
I wish you really more and more fail, because you really a lot. Every time you fail, if you have a good like note when you write everything and you know exactly why you failed, that's how you learn. That's really the only way. So I wish you more and more fail.
Well, probably your wish will come true.
It was me too. The last beer, because I still have my home-brew system, and the last beer I made, it get infected, because here I'm in a very old house, and it's not optimal to brew because of the dust, and they use the place to make a lot of other fermented things. So you have a lot of yeast around and mushroom and stuff. And so I got infected. And it's actually the mushroom, the bacteria, the infection that is used to create a very famous Belgian beer, the Gueuze. But when I see the infection and I smell the beer, I was like, wow, it smells super good. So I taste it, and it tastes like a Gueuze.
Oh.
So it's a good fail.
A happy accident.
Or we'll see. Maybe I'm gonna drink a beer and then you will never see me again. But
I haven't had any infection, so I haven't had that experience yet. But I did have the oxygen damage.
I think the one thing I've never really dabbled with, mostly because I didn't stay in one place long enough to consider it, is the importance of playing with the water chemistry. a lot of the advanced home brewers, like, they swear by this. Like, you have to deal with the minerals and the pH, and you have to make sure that the conditions are really perfect.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to get the right
taste.
About soft
well,
water.
not just the right taste, but
Even the
just
fermentation.
certain things that you expect are going to happen are not going to happen at certain temperatures because you're lacking the right pH.
Right.
But what I always figured is, the point for most famous breweries is their water. They just adapt to their water. So if I find that certain recipes don't work with my water, I would just change the recipe. But other people are very stubborn. I feel like they'd rather change the water. So I don't know if you have a view on how aggressively you should interact with the water, but I understand, like, I have a mountain stream that goes by our home, and I'm thinking about trying to use it, but I'm very sure that it will be very inconsistent water chemistry from summer to winter and spring. And so that's why I'm kind of hesitant to start, because unless I brew certain things at certain times of year, it's going to be, there are going to be some weird surprises.
In Japan, most of the water you get from like the city water is very soft. So it's really good to drink, but for beer, if you don't want to do a Pilsner or lager, well, it's the worst water because it's super soft. And at the same time, it's the best water if you like to play with your chemistry water, because if it's soft, I mean that you can really add a lot of things and change it. Me, I always play with my water because it's soft, and I prefer pale ale, so I have to make it more hard. And yeah, even here in our village, we get the water directly from the river, but then it's filtered by the city system. We have a waterfall, and then from there it come here. But this system puts a lot of chlorine and make the water softer. And the chlorine is really bad with the yeast because you have a lot of ester is coming from it.
Right.
So right now we are thinking we found a little spring close to our brewery, so we're gonna dig to see if we can get more from it and have clear water. Because, like you say, most of the brewery in the world, they choose their place because of the water.
Right.
It's not by mistake that they choose a place. It's really because the water there have certain properties. So it's very important to know what water you use. And here you mentioned that you have this spring water. First, be sure it's drinkable, for sure. And the best to do is to take a sample and to send it to a lab and have like the list of what inside, and you should, to be sure. But mostly spring water always have the same, the same chemistry. It's more than a city water. A city water can change more actually than a spring water, because city water, you never know how they manage it, and maybe they will put more. Maybe there is an infection. Maybe there is a rain that brings more mud to the system. So you never know how it's gonna change.
Interesting. So you're saying that spring water is actually more consistent?
Yeah, a good spring water is usually more consistent. If there is no like suddenly a company that decide to make like to dig around, but if not, it should be always the same.
I've been thinking about this because I've been using just my regular tap water, and I have a filter system, the Tore water filter on there. I filter it with that, and then I add according to what I've read, I've added a spoonful of the gypsum to add the calcium or make it a little bit more alkaline. Yeah, alkaline. But just a few blocks away from me is a Sento that I go to, and they have a natural spring of cold water, not hot water. It's not an onsen. And that water we can put into bottles and take home as much as we want. And so I've been thinking about doing that. Just bring my tank down there. Hi. Fill up my tank.
Yeah,
well, Nils, I've been drinking my mountain water from Kutski for about 8 or 10 years now. My family's been drinking it for 5. I always bring up a 20-liter jug with me every time I go to the farm, and It's amazing water. It is so good.
Well, maybe I should go with you sometime and just fill up my tank.
I'm happy to accommodate you, really, because I'd like to see how that works. The water there is so wonderful. It's so much different from city water. I mean, we all drink it. My son, who's almost 10, he just drinks water. I mean, I never drank water when I was a kid. Who really drinks water, right? It's that good. It's that different. So, yeah.
The best thing to do is to try different styles that have like really different like water base. So you try a Pilsner, you try an IPA, you try maybe a wheat beer. Just try different things with the same water and to see the results. Anyway, for sure, going to a mountain water for any kind of beer, it's always better because you remove all the chlorine that's inside. Because even if you let your tank maybe open for one night just for the chlorine to evaporate, or you filter with charcoal, you may still have some kind of trace of it, or even other kind of
for sure
chemistry that they put to clean the water. For sure, anyway, it's better to use a mountain water, and you may come with a very interesting result at the end.
Thank you.
That's awesome, guys. I really had a good time tonight. You guys all came up with such interesting conversation. But I knew this was going to go deep, but I didn't expect it to be so collaborative. I mean, everybody's got something to say and add to the story. And beer has got a rich history, and it's such a part of all of our lives. I mean, I'm really glad we were able to do this. I really thank you, Julien and Vince, for bringing in your expertise, and Hart and Nils for all the questions, and everybody else who's logged on and spent time with us tonight and texted in your questions and stuff like that, because this is amazing. I mean, to in this time of Corona, when we're all kind of stuck at home and we're not being able to go out and do things like this, it's fun. It's fun to have a group conversation like this, like we're all in a pub somewhere, just shooting the shit over some cups of beer and stuff like that. And yeah, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks to you, Jack.
Thank you.
Thank you for organizing this.
No, my pleasure. Maybe we'll have a part 2 next year sometime to check in on Julien and your growing your nano brewery, and Vince with you to hear more about your hops and stuff like that. Yeah, we've got to get out
because I'm now renovating the house, and even though you're more than welcome.
Well, I got to tell you, if you can have us up in winter, I'd be happy, because I think it's going to be a bigger winter this year. Last year's winter was a poof, for us. It was like 30 centimeters of snow, and
here they say usually it fall like about 2 meters here. So last year was 60 centimeters. So for me, it was a lot. For them, it's nothing. So, but they say
no, it's nothing. It's going to be a big one.
This year is going to be a tough one.
Okay, so well, maybe we'll make our way up there, because the farm is closed under a meter of snow. It's like, well, I'm not doing anything. I'm not going to dig out the onions. So, yeah, okay, cool. And Vince, I'm definitely going to come out to your place. Maybe I'll come out when there's a hop harvest. I'd love to see how that goes.
Yeah, that'll be
be a part of it, because
summer.
I love the farming game and everything else. And the last order of business, I mean, of everybody who's logged on, I think just Hart and Nils, you're the only Kyoto people. So, we could flip a coin. I mean, Hart, you are in Kyoto, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, why don't we just all three meet up at a pub, and I'll buy you both a beer. I mean, I don't want to choose from the two of you. So if we can make a date of it.
Buy you a beer. So.
Sounds fun.
There's always round 2 and round 3, But
or we meet, for an illicit homebrew somewhere else.
Yeah.
Maybe we can have rope Vincent in, because he's in Kyoto as well.
Yeah, I'm in Kyoto. So, yeah.
You just have to give me the dates in advance. So
excellent. Sounds good. Sometime in November is out there right now, and let's just make an email list, and let's make that happen.
I can go down from my mountain.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Hopefully your beer will have bubbles by then. You can bring some.
We'll see. I'm not sure.
All right, guys. Well, that's it for today. I really had a wonderful time. This went much deeper than I'd hoped, and I'm very happy. If you guys want to, say anything, just give us a shout at Midori Farm. If you have any questions, if you're watching this on YouTube, because I'm going to be posting this on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, thanks for logging in, and please like and subscribe, because we're just growing, and for your information, Midori Farm is going to do their best to become an NPO by next spring or summer. And then we can really be a more of a useful hub to people and try to plug in a little better here and there. We're doing our Midori Farm harvesting of sweet potatoes next weekend, and that'll be our next live event on Zoom with Midori Farm, just harvesting sweet potatoes, part of our community farm event. And then in November, we'll be having people up just to eat the sweet potatoes because they've been cured already, and playing in the mountains and stuff like that, checking out the farm, seeing what else is growing, maybe do some hiking, do some onsen. And then, in December, we'll start our winter season, so come on up in the snow, and then check in back with us for next spring for more harvests and more baskets. Please join our CSA if you're interested in organic vegetables. I'm still providing about 20 to 30 customers a week, with organic vegetables. So hopefully you'll join in because they're all harvested fresh, delivered without plastic, and grown responsibly and with a lot more nutrients in it than that you'll buy in a supermarket. So if you're into that kind of stuff, please plug into me on either Facebook or send me an email or through my website, midorifarm.net. Other than that, that's all I have for tonight. And I just want to thank everybody again for all their contributions and advice. And we hope to see you again.
Thanks, Jack.
Good evening, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Cheers to you.